Good evening, everybody, and welcome to One World, One Blood Bowl number 43. I am thrilled to say we have three brand new faces to One World, One Blood Bowl, and reasonably new to Blood Bowl itself. This entire episode is an audience suggestion. I'm thrilled to do it. I thought instantly that's a great idea. Let's do that. So this is 10 things I wish I knew when I started Blood Bowl. And yes, you're not going to believe number 8. So I've got on three people because also part of the suggestion was that I get on people with basically about 100 games played. So they're recent enough or fresh enough converts to Blood Bowl that they can look back at the beginning and say, here's what I've learned so far. But they're not tired, grumbly, sweaty old veterans who'll talk about things in the 1980s. I don't know if any of them remember the 1980s. They all look a bit young for that. So I'm just going to try and ask the questions and get the information out of them. And we will get to 10, Ode to Joy. We absolutely will. I promise. We're going to go quickly. But first of all,
Not
let's
too
meet the
quickly.
lovely people we have, and then we'll start asking them what do they think now they wish they'd known when they started Blood Bowl. So directly above me on your screens, we have somebody I don't know volunteered to come on, the damned fool. Say hello to Duerbrouqc. Hello.
Well, good evening.
That went great. The exact sort of start I love here. Good evening. Thank you. It is evening here. Not evening where you are, I believe.
It is. It's well, almost evening.
Joining us from somewhere over the Atlantic in North America, I believe.
Yes, in Ohio, the Midwest.
Wow, so you and all the potatoes.
Cows, actually. Cows and corn.
Okay, I know very little about Ohio, as you can say. How long have you been playing Blood Bowl?
So played my very first game of Blood Bowl in August of 22, so just last year. Proceeded to lose every single game. So I joined Fumble in October of last year and continued to lose every single game. I joined 145 Club and have called my way to be a maybe middling coach now. So pretty proud of that.
Excellent. It's important to have realistic goals. None of us are necessarily going to start something new and dominate the world. So you're a year into Blood Bowl, you're loving it, and you think you can look back and say, here's some stuff I should have known at the start there.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Tabletop, does it tempt you? Is that the future of your Blood Bowling, or are you loving the online world?
Absolutely. So I did two small tournaments last year. And then in 2024, I'm signed up for some bigger tournaments. So I'll be going to Super Bowl in Chicago at
Okay.
Adepticon, which is pretty big. I have a team with Rasmus from 145 Club
Hmm.
that's going up to Ottawa in June for the Immortal Cup. There's some folks from across the pond that will be there as well. And then my brother-in-law is trying to talk me into going to Chaos Cup. So yeah, I'm learning how to paint. I'm learning that that's actually harder than playing Blood Bowl, but
Oh,
Never.
we'll
absolutely.
get there.
I resolutely can't paint, and I would be horrified to show anyone anything I was forced to paint. eBay, I love eBay for ready painted stuff, and thank goodness there are painters out there that sell their teams to me because otherwise I wouldn't have teams. It sounds like the whole hobby is grabbing you, so welcome to Blood Bowl.
I have five kids. The first one just went off to college, and so I'm starting to get some free time. And so Blood Bowl is it's my hobby right now.
Okay, now speaking of new people, of course, the other person up on the top row is NaticalSoup. Now we did just discuss before we came on. You're a descendant of mine, aren't you? And indeed, you are
Yeah.
in the great Nosferatu-like bloodline of the immortal Pete W,
Yeah,
who
we
brought
share a
me to
vampire house.
tabletop. I brought Rumbad to tabletop, and he is partly guilty of bringing you to tabletop, I believe.
Yeah, I started playing in April, and the reason, or maybe it was a little later, it was somewhere around then, in the maybe in the summer. Um, I found out that Run Bad was going to be running. I'd always been looking at trying to Blood Bowl again, just as an alternative. I played some of the larger GW brands like Warhammer and stuff like that. But as an alternative to those, I was looking to get back into it, and I saw that he was going to be running a local league. I don't even remember where I saw it originally. Maybe Facebook. I have to think about that. But that basically convinced me to go find out where I could play some Blood Bowl. I looked up some reviews for Blood Bowl 3 that were very bad at the time. And then through that led me to Fumble. I think there's a review on Blood Bowl 3 that told me to download Fumble, so I did. And found 145 from there. Started getting my early games in. Played tabletop, got some practice games in so I could attend Run Bad's tournament here in Kingston in October. And here we are, 6 months in, about 100 games deep, maybe 30% of them tabletop, the rest on Fumble.
And has the painting started to grab you? Are you busily
Oh
buying
yeah,
your brushes and
I'm.
getting your magnifiers out?
I already have some painting experience from playing Warhammer.
Yeah,
You can kind of see a case of Warhammer stuff back there.
I did figure, yes.
I've got some undead on my desk here that I was painting just before, or getting ready to paint for Runbad's tabletop league that will be coming up soon.
And has our lack of tape measures and the idea of a team being 12 rather than army being 300, has that
Oh,
have we
so
bought
much
you?
better.
Has Blood Bowl got into your very soul yet?
Yes, painting a team in particular is a lot less of an agonizing year-long project than painting an army for Warhammer. No question.
I do wonder if that's why things like Kill Team are very popular. Is that those smaller
Definitely.
scale, just meaning that the hobbyists really get to enjoy their fun and not feel it's a chore.
Yeah,
Excellent.
for
Well,
sure.
that's two people definitely well qualified. The third person I've asked on is someone I do know from the London area. So hello to I know him as Rob, but also Salty McCutt. Good evening, Salty. Welcome to One World, One
How
Blood Bowl.
do?
You and Blood Bowl. Tell us about it. How did you meet Blood Bowl? Where did it catch your eye? And how long have you been playing?
So I used to play Warhammer Underworlds before COVID, and then COVID came along and pretty much killed that game for me. Was looking for a different system, and Blood Bowl was there. I'd seen some guys playing it in a local board game club, and got one of the guys' numbers, and then it never really kicked off. I missed out on the season they were running, so got back in touch with him. And Loin, who you've had on the show before, was at my local sort of gaming bar pub club. So I reached out to him. He was running a tournament. I was like, I think I've got a good enough grasp. And he was like, play a practice game. If you're all right at that, come down, play this tournament. 3 days later, I played the practice game. He was like, sure, you'll be all right. Off I popped, and there we went. That was my foray straight into Blood Bowl. And it sort of rapidly picked up pace from there. Jumped into a beginners league. That finished, was like, well, what do we do now? There's nothing else going on in London at the moment. So I started my own league and then ran that with about 16 players for the first season, and that's continued from there.
Where did you
Jumped
find
back
just?
into the
Oh, I just found 16 players and ran a
Whoa, yeah,
league.
that's a lot
so
of players.
so
There's a step I think's
one of
missing in
one
that
of
story.
the London leagues is the DBL, and Mark, who runs the beginners league, is the guy that I bumped into in a pub and sort of got back in contact with, and he runs a beginners league. And then a lot of the guys that had played the beginners league were like, well, we also want to play more Blood Bowl, but the main league doesn't kick off for like another 3-4 months. And I was like, I've got some spare time. I'll speak to Mark and I'll see if we can sort something out to fill the gap. And that's what we did. A lot of those guys came over, some guys that were playing in the main DBL. I got to know them because they were sort of about, they jumped in, and we've sort of run. We're about to kick off season 6 tomorrow, with 28 players, kicking off tomorrow. So that'll be good fun.
So my top row guys, has tabletop league play tempted you? I know in North America it might be harder to find one of those, but is it a thing, and does it catch your eye?
Do you want to go first?
I'm actually in a league. There is a small league in Columbus, Ohio. Last year when I played, there were 10 of us that were active, and then this year we have
Cool.
18. So we're pretty excited about it. We've been playing at the local game stores, and trying to be visible so that when people walk by, they're looking at it, they're seeing the pitch, right, and they're going, "What
Yeah.
game is this?" And they'll sit and watch. I have a friend that paints really well, so that attracts folks. And then I have a Pikachu Skaven team, so a lot of kids will come over and watch me play the Skaven team, and so then their parents are like, "What's this? I kind of want to get into it too." So, definitely want to grow the community, because that's the best part of Blood Bowl.
So you attract children over to watch one of the most stressful and competitive games that there is on tabletop, with a deliberately child-themed team. I just hope
Yeah,
I hope you don't have a large white van and a bag of sweets in it as well.
they think it's great until Pikachu dies, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talked a lot about kids in Blood Bowl on
Getting
this show.
fouled.
We're big fans of them. I mean, I can think of, obviously, Mini Morg on the London scene we've mentioned before, Thomas W. we had on when we did a show about kids. There's some brilliantly talented kids that play Blood Bowl. How they cope with some of the risk and that feeling of loss when a plan goes wrong, I don't know. I don't know how you deal with that at 11 or 12. But I have seen one cry when their favourite gutter died. But 3 minutes later, they're coaching the next turn and fouling the first thing they can lay a boot into. So I don't see why kids shouldn't enjoy Blood Bowl. I don't see why anybody shouldn't enjoy Blood Bowl. Leagues, have they tempted you, Nautical Soup? Have you launched into the league play?
Absolutely. I haven't had the opportunity to start yet. Like I said, Run Bad starting our my understanding is that there was at one time in our city a bit of a Blood Bowl league scene, but it's before my time. There might have been some drama or something. It fell apart, and there hasn't been an ambient league that has been at least publicly, available since then. So Run Bad's getting that back spooled up so far. I think we've got about 10 players starting in the next couple of weeks. The idea to make it ongoing and try and recruit people season by season as much as we can.
Well, I mean, from what I hear,
newer players.
I mean, you've got two examples here already, but from what I hear from everyone I talk to, I don't play leagues. I do, as Salty knows, I go to tournaments, but I don't go to leagues. Of what I hear from every club, from everyone that plays on that scene, it's thriving, and the clubs are growing, and the numbers are growing, and people are coming back to the game. New people are finding the game, and people are giving up their, wardrobe-sized armies and 88 sets of dice to come and play something they can travel with a backpack and do anywhere they want in an hour and a half. Which does have certain key advantages, of course, which they're leaning into with the whole Age of Sigmar thing and Kill Team and stuff as well. So Blood Bowl is thriving, and we're all playing it, both online and tabletops and tournaments, and what an exciting, lovely thing to talk about. 10 things. We've promised the people 10 things. We've got to try and come up with those. So I set you all a question. Some of you have done actual homework here. I got a thesis from one of you over 2 pages. I'm not going to humiliate you. I didn't check the spelling. Very well argued. It had sub-bullet points as well as bullet points. I always love a sub-bullet point. As to things that we'd all learned since we started playing Blood Bowl. Now, that was such a long time ago for me that I may not be able to help here. I know what I think is important, but I don't know what I thought was important back then. So who wants to kick me off? What's one of the things that you think is the most important thing you wish you'd known right back when you started Blood Bowl?
Reroll management. Reroll management. When you sit down for your first game of Blood Bowl, you're going to throw the dice, roll dub skulls, and be like, that's not happening. I'm re-rolling that. No. Is the ball safe where it is? Is it right in the backfield where no opposition player can get to it? Does that need to be re-rolled? Probably not. Save it for a turn. You really need it. It's such instinct when you first start playing, just going, oh, something bad's happened. Let's fix it. It doesn't always need a fix. Sometimes a little band-aid is fine. Sometimes you need surgery. Save it for the surgery.
Okay, it's a big, bold one. I see a little shake of the head there, Duerbrouqc. Are you agreeing? Is reroll management important? Is it something we should be grasping early?
Yeah, it was one of the things I noticed when I started looking at my play versus other people's play on Fumble was we get to turn 5, in the first half, I'd have 0 rerolls and they would still have all 3. And I'm like, what's going on? So couldn't make my own luck. So definitely reroll management is up there. Knowing when to use them and when to save them.
Nautical, let's just bring you in on. How do you feel?
Yeah, I have a thought on this too. So obviously it's always been a core part of the learning curve to the game. Reroll management. It's like you pay a ton of TV for rerolls, so you have to get the most out of them. But I think that's so 2020 does this thing where it kind of baits you into wasting more rerolls than the previous versions of the game because of the fact that you can commit to a really, really risky play or have some seriously bad luck and burn through like a whole bank of rerolls in just one drive, like one turn of one drive, and be completely tapped out for the rest of the half. And I saw that happen actually at the tournament against one of my newer opponents. It was like you can burn through rerolls ridiculously fast. You take risky actions or take an action that requires rolling like 6 dice in a row. You can burn through all 3 or 4 of your rerolls instantly. And on the other hand, the fact that you can do that means it's even more critical than it was to bank up those rerolls because on turn 7 or 8 or whenever you're setting up into scoring position, you might need to make a bunch of rolls in sequence, and being able to throw 3 rerolls at it all at once is pretty damn good.
Yeah, so keeping them back as much as possible, looking at every single time there's a fail and saying, does this absolutely need to not be a fail? Even if it's your first block on turn 1, not just thinking, oh god, I need to, this turn I need to keep going.
Do I
it's my turn
really
1.
need to knock the
But
LOS
do I really
down
need to do it? Yeah. I mean, I think there always is in Blood Bowl. There's nuance to every answer, isn't there? So I'm going to put in a counterpoint. How important is keeping the momentum going, though? Because you're going to cede momentum as well as position at that point. Should that be something I worry about?
Dependent on team for me. It's going to mainly, I mean, this will come up as a point later, but Blood Bowl, there's one thing that matters, the ball. If you can't score, you can't win, if that's what you're playing the game for. So it mainly, is the ball still going to be secure? Is this me just trying to get an advantage on the line of scrimmage? Is this me trying to put pressure on somewhere? It's going to depend on what turn you're on. You know, if you're playing against elves and you're expecting them to do the quick score and then you want to have a slow burning drive, the elf player might just burn up those rerolls by turn 2, 3 just to get that score in, just so they can then get the ball back and go again. If you're playing dwarves, that's a lot less likely to happen. They're going to slowly trundle down the pitch, and if they fail a block somewhere, probably not going to do too much harm to the drive unless it's on like the corner of a cage or it's the ball carrier crazily making a blitz or something, which it's probably gone a little bit wrong if that's what you're doing.
I do think there's certain races that can really help with this as well. What races helped you realise that reroll management was important before I throw my 2 penneth in?
Playing Black Orcs.
Okay, and what was it that brought to the table, do you think?
I mean, I guess Lizardmen too. It's the 1 in 9, the 1 in 9 blocks. Like you can get a lot of 2 dice blocks in as Black Orcs, like a ton of 2 dice blocks, but you're going to turn over like often. Even with Brawl, you're turning over a considerable number. Like if you manage to base up your guys on the regular and actually get those blocks in, you're going to be turning yourself over with somewhat often.
Yeah, I did the numbers on that actually when it first came out. Assuming only 2 die blocks and discounting blitz is obviously where Brawler doesn't work, it turns a 1 in 9 into a 1 in 18.
Yep.
So it's half as unlikely, but it's still with 6 orcs activating every turn. You're still going to, several times a half, you are going to hit one where it's a both.
There's also a really good example in there because Black Orcs are a team where you might burn a reroll on turn 1. If you've got the grab set up beautifully where you can surf one of the good players,
yeah,
it's probably worth the reroll on turn 1 if you can get those chained down and get that player off the pitch. So again, it's all going to be circumstantial where you need to know your team, what you're trying to do with your team. I think that'll be a point later, but knowing your team, what pace you're trying to play your team at, how you want to time your drives, that's all going to be part of your reroll management. But I think a thing, again, as a new coach, don't feel like every time something goes wrong, it doesn't need to be throw a reroll at it, throw a reroll at it,
so
throw a
reroll management,
it,
but specifically, sometimes accept the both down, accept the fail, accept the skulls.
Yeah.
You're going to fail go for it. Black Orc's another good example. You're going to be taking go for it, and you're going to be failing go for it, and sometimes you just got to eat them.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, everything is so interlinked in Blood Bowl. I instantly then want to talk about turn prioritization and risk management from that perspective. But sometimes you're going to throw the best possible block available to you. It's going to be a lovely 2 or even 3 die block, and they're going to come up skulls. And at that point, rather than thinking, I've got a great plan, I need to throw a reroll at this, your first thought should be, do I need to throw a reroll at this? Can I accept that? Bad things happen in life, and sometimes even on the very first turn. I did play someone at the World Cup who had skulls on their first action of the very first turn of the game. They had 2 rerolls, they decided to put it in, and they double skulled the next action, having got pushes instead. Turn 2 also started with double skulls, which he also rerolled using his only other reroll, and rerolled that into double skulls again. He rolled 4 more double skulls in the first half. I've never faced anyone so unlucky. But bad luck is going to hit us all.
Did he win?
No.
He didn't win? Okay.
He was also very, very sad. I felt for him. Okay, Duerbrouqc and or NaticalSoup, hit me with number 2. What's the second most important thing we wish we had known back when we started Blood Bowl?
So we're talking about bad luck. For me, one of the most important things I wish someone told me was, you're not getting dice. You just suck.
Brutal.
Nuffle is evil. Dicing do happen, right? But it's unlikely that you're going to have bad dice 5, 10, 20 games in a row, right?
Yeah.
So, in a typical game, you roll lots of dice. So double skulls are going to happen. Snake eyes are going to happen. The good players are going to be able to prepare for it. They're going to be able to overcome it. And so the sooner that I stopped blaming the dice and started criticizing my own play, right, looking at positioning, looking at reroll management and all that stuff, the sooner I could get better. And so when I play new folks in 145 Club, I see the same thing. You know, I roll double skulls, good game, you won because I have bad luck. And it's like, well, double skulls is bad luck, that's for sure. But there's 4, 5, 6 different things you could have done here to
Right.
mitigate that, you know, so that you wouldn't be in such a bad situation.
Always consider your fail states.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Do we agree that actually you just suck? Is that something we wish we'd known when we started Blood Bowl? Salty,
So I
did you suck?
spoke to Phil, also known as King Ghidra, about this quite recently, and he made a good point that I hadn't really thought about. There's also knowing the percentage of the dice rolls that you're throwing. Some people play Math Bowl, and that's absolutely fine. Some are a little bit less risk averse and just throw the dice, and that's fine. But I think there's knowing when the dice go wrong because they probably should have gone wrong. If you're trying to make a 5+, 6+, 6+, the odds are pretty slim on that. So when it goes wrong, don't feel too bad about it. Whereas, yes, we've all dodged with elves or done the 3+ dodge with a reroll and it's gone wrong at a key moment. And I think you can feel bad about those sometimes, especially when it's like the second or third time it's happened in the game. But I think it's not necessarily, it's knowing when the odds are kind of against you anyway, or when you were making the right play, but it just went wrong. And
Yes, I mean, I
up
do
about
agree with that, but I think you've got to get over a few hurdles to even get to that level of knowledge.
Yeah.
I think at the start, you just absolutely suck. And
Yeah.
even if you've played, 10 games against your mate Bob, his girlfriend, and their disinterested dog, and you've beaten them well, that doesn't mean you're any good at Blood Bowl. And when you sit down with someone who has played 100 games or has played 1,000 games online, do you know what? You suck. And when
Beginning
you
is a
think
learning
you've been
curve.
unlucky, it's because the position is one you don't understand. And they've done things that you're not capable of seeing what they're doing. So that if they had the same fail, they wouldn't look as unlucky because they've prepared for it, and you haven't.
They didn't have to make a 3-up into a 3-up to score. They just never had that risk in the
They
first place.
just stepped over the line. So there's a lot of things I think that right at the start you don't perceive, and a lot of people do put it down to chance when it really isn't. It's you just not knowing better yet, and that can really only come with experience. But part of that experience is accepting that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So far we've got reroll management and remember that it's you. You suck. Brilliant. I think we can just move on from that one. A hot topic, but one that I think we can all nod and go yes at the start. I sucked, and everyone does too. Nautical Soup, let me have a number 3. What else do we really need to know back when we started Blood Bowl? What would have helped us get better quicker, or be better at the game, or have a better time?
This one is I know this was on, so I think this was on Salty's list too because he put it in the Discord earlier when we were talking about this. But it's my number 1 for a new player entering the game, and it's because it's such a tangible, practical, material barrier to becoming a Blood Bowl player. And it's don't buy the second season starter box. Don't do it. Find somebody who already plays Blood Bowl, borrow a team, play a game with one of their teams, humans, orcs, undead, something nice and safe, something that will win you a game, maybe one in 6 games against an average player. Don't try to learn the game with Black Orcs. Don't try to learn the game with Imperial Nobility. It's an uphill slog. Learning Blood Bowl is hard enough without playing very strangely organized suboptimal teams that play to very unusual niches. Like
I don't think it's not even just that. It's literally, here are the rules of the game, and then here are 2 teams that completely ignore those rules of the game. So Grab just completely turns off where you can put players, and then you've constantly got Fend and Wrestle, which is just like, oh, you want to learn positional play? Fend, stand firm. I would shout it, but it's a bit late. But it's just that. The only reason you should play Imperial Nobility at the start is if you want to be that guy that shouts stand firm in someone's face at the club, which we all massively enjoy.
Wow. So, but how... I'm going to have to bring you in on this. Do we have anyone speaking up for the Season 2 box set?
It's good for existing players.
Duerbrouqc.
It's like it's like 2 challenge teams that they definitely won't already have owned. But oh my god, I imagine that's been like the single biggest barrier to new players actually getting into Blood Bowl because it's the GW's starting point. It's the entry point. If you Google Blood Bowl starter, Blood Bowl, you're going to come up second season box, you buy it for you and your buddy, and then you realize that you hate this game because it's just a bunch of nonsense that doesn't make any sense. And
Yeah.
so,
I'd love to be speaking out against this, but sadly, lovely Chicken 23 that we had on the show a couple of weeks ago, talking about his experiences at the World Cup. Because he bought the starter box, he painted the Black Orcs up. So the only thing he has coached on tabletop is Black Orcs. Everywhere he's been, every tournament he's been to, he is Black Orcs. And the problem with that is Black Orcs are very, very shit at Blood Bowl. So obviously he's not having that great a time. He's getting a lot better with Black Orcs. Whether he's learning lessons that are that applicable to actual teams that can play Blood Bowl well, I don't know. But I fear for him. Luckily he still seems happy and engaged, but what a terrible thing to do to yourself.
just tormenting your
Also not to say that Blorks or Knobs are like the worst team in the game.
No.
They're just not good for starting coaches.
Yeah.
You don't learn fundamental mechanics, right? You're missing out on that whole learning of positioning, of what skills are important and relevant. You've already got a cluster of very strange, unusual positionals and skills that you won't see that much of otherwise outside of these teams. And then one of them is nobility are really bad at offense, and Black Orcs they're Black Orcs. They have all their own weirdness.
Yes, they're terrible at everything except fouling well.
Kind of, yeah. Fouling, yeah.
Okay, I mean, I find I'm kind of agreeing. I don't want to, because that's the box set that's out on the shelves. That's what people are buying to get into Blood Bowl. And they're getting their pitch. They're getting their rule marker and their passing chart and the rules, at least. But they're getting two teams that you think are limiting them.
I just wish they were Orcs and Humans, or something of that kind. Those are like... For teaching people, I've used them as Orcs and Humans as like stand-ins, because it's so much easier trying to teach people how to play with normal players that don't have weird skills and horrible downsides.
Duerbrouqc, are you anti that, the first box set?
I understand that a lot of previous box sets had Orcs and Humans, and so maybe GW thinks that's boring, but having 4 block is such a nice safety net when you're learning. And you're catering a product to new players that aren't going to have Orcs and Humans anyway. A seasoned, Blood Bowl player's not going to buy a starter set. He's already going to have the pitch and the models and all that good stuff. So it's not a great way to start the game for sure.
I do think there's a lot of good things in that, but you can buy the rule set, the rule book without the box set. You can buy pitches without the box set. You can buy dugouts; they come with the pitch. For a range marker, I would personally buy a Charlie Victor ball token, which comes with a range marker on it, which I think is better than the piece of plastic rubbish that Games Workshop give you. But I'm going to come with a counterpoint here. 65 quid or 100 quid, whatever it is for that box, it's somewhere in that sort of region. It's not that bad a price for 2 resin teams that are pretty much
really good.
What you need, and a pitch, and the dugouts, and the rule book, and some tokens, and I think they throw a ref and a couple of star players in. It's not terrible, is it?
But would it not be better if you just redid Orcs and Humans, where you had 4 blitzers in each box set, and it was all just nice and reorganized? They didn't all have the same sculpt, and then people would buy it because you can't get hold of those teams very easily. And if you do, you have to buy 2 boxes of them, even though they are the best beginner teams in the game.
Yeah, I still think Orcs and Humans are good things to start on. I think it teaches you Blood Bowl better to have all those basic simple skills, and then also simple skills that have built-in rerolls. And obviously the value of a few block pieces is taught by both of those really well. Okay, I think we've got 3 exciting points. And obviously we promised them that number 8 is going to just blow their minds. And yet they've probably realised that we've no idea what number 8 is going to end up being. So it's all just a lie. It is. It's all... I'm just using clickbait to try and get people to watch. Sorry. So let's go with number 4, because number 8 is going to blow your mind. Who's going to come in with a number 4? What have we not mentioned yet? That's a really important thing to know right when you start. Come on then, Salty.
I've got one that's a bit of a coverall. Cool. And I guess the easiest way of explaining it is the game in between the game. So it is setting up on offense or defense. So at the start of the game, once someone has scored, setting up. There are 2 things that I think are keys there, which is protecting against the blitz result on the kickoff table. Don't leave massive holes, because a coach that knows what they're doing is just going to run straight through that, and you're in trouble before you've even taken an action on the board. And also, the more you play, this will be a little bit later on in your playing career, I would imagine, is knowing how to score a one-turner or defend against a one-turner, especially once you go into tournament play, because it is just becoming more and more and more and more and more prominent, especially with those stupid little schemes, dribble and roll.
Yes.
But yes, that'll be my sort of two little things, is just when you go to set up before turn one has even happened, you need to be aware of the blitz kickoff event. You need to be aware of a one-turner if it's turn 7 or 8, so they might throw teammates. You need to know how to set up against that, or if they're going to try and push their way through and get a gutter runner or a skink or any other horrible thing that I hate through your lines.
I'm gonna put this into a clickbaity title of "The game starts before you roll dice." How's that? How's that? Yeah.
My brother-in-law introduced me to the game, and he said Blood Bowl is really easy. All you have to do is roll pals and 6s. But if you don't know how to do that, then what you need to do is always prepare for the worst and just hope for the best. And so you prepare for the blitz, you prepare for the one-turn touchdown, and just hope they don't get it.
Okay, I kind of agree. Nautical, what would you say about this? The game between the game, the preparing and beginning your playing even before you've rolled dice. How important is that to get your head around?
I mean, it's important, but it's also very abstract. It's a hard to make that leap as a new player, still figuring out like how the math crunches. I think maybe to some degree it's best to approach it from a rote perspective. I don't want to leap into another one on the list, but like a lot of things like defensive setups and offensive setups are most easily learned by just having someone tell you what you should do and then figuring out why you should do it later.
So some things you can just bang out and go, okay, I know how to do this.
Yeah.
It's something that a couple of new players said to me. So, okay, I've got my team. Where do they start? I go, well, wherever you put them. They go, yeah, but what are the starting positions for them? Well, okay. I mean, there's some limits. You can only have 2 out wide and 3 have to be on the line. But other than that, wherever you put them. And they're sort of bewildered with that level of
Right.
freedom.
Exactly. It is bewildering.
Yeah, and with that freedom comes responsibility, because there's always that fear, have I got this wrong? Now, there are ways of getting that game between the games wrong, isn't there? Who's had players surfed on turn 1 due to bad positioning?
Never on turn 1. Were you playing Black Orcs? Or
No,
against Black Orcs?
I mean, when I started, I used to put people on the edges. I thought it was an edgy thing to do, and they'd get surfed all the time. I went to the NAFC and played a lovely Chaos Dwarf coach and surfed both his bulls and one of his chorfs in the first 2 turns. And he I hope, got a little more understanding of sideline play from it. I do think also you can put too much effort into setups, though. I think you're right. Once you know not to put them in terrible places, then overthinking them is a bit crazy too, because it is only how things start. So as long as you're not making big mistakes, I think that's probably cool.
Learn how to do like 2, for whatever team you're trying to learn. Learn 2 to 3 standard, fairly efficient setups against different. Like learn how to do a chevron, like where the guys generally need to stand to be effective. Learn how to do like a boat or an anchor or whatever you want to call it, a safe one, and then how to defend against like a one turn or a throw teammate or whatever. Like that's probably going to get you most of the way for a while anyway.
Now, fantastically, he's on ad break at the moment. So whilst you'll all know I've repeated this, Jimmy Fantastic won't. He's made a fantastic point in chat. A good setup can't win you the game, but a bad one can lose it for you. And I do think that's definitely true. Also ask somebody about how to set up against a 2-turn. You know, there's a lot of times where you might have to just hold the line for a couple of turns and you'll win the game. And there are certain setups that are much more effective at that and others that aren't. Okay, I think that's 4 fantastic points, but time is against us. I do want to keep going and then discuss just the whole of, that learning process and what got us there at the end. But let's get through the 10 first, so we've met our promises and commitments. Who can come in with a number 5? I'm looking at the top row. What have we not covered yet?
If we go on the rotation, you're next?
No, anyone. I don't care. Let's have chaos rather than order. Nautical, let's bring you in.
Okay, let's see here. My list is all messed up now.
Good.
Let's say these are all really good, I think. Not to pat myself on the back, but to pick the most important one. I think attitude. I think we would all probably agree that Blood Bowl can be one of the most frustrating experiences in terms of game. It's kind of like playing chess, except sometimes your pawn trips over and breaks his own neck, just for no particular reason. He just dies, and then your turn also ends, and then your opponent gets to just roll you up in a blanket and throw you off a bridge. So managing your own attitude is like one of the most difficult parts of the Blood Bowl learning curve. It's like this is maybe like kind of it reminds me of back when League of Legends was popular. MOBAs are another game that are uniquely frustrating to play and just bring out the salt and rage like nothing else. So it's like there was one of the experienced coaches on 145 put it in a way that I really like, and I wish I could credit him, but I couldn't find the comment on Discord. But he basically said that the ideal temperament for a Blood Bowl player was like halfway between like Zen Buddhist and like just utterly bloodthirsty. Maintaining that, letting things roll off your shoulder while still being in the mood to, like, if you're losing a game, to do some damage to your opponent, to get some SPP out of it, to make it hard for him, even if you can't possibly win. Just tenacious, bloodthirsty, and above all else, calm. Because salt does affect
Tenacious,
your ability to
bloodthirsty,
play.
and calm. So
Yeah.
a spiritual ninja,
Exactly.
just rolling dice. How long did it take you to cultivate that attitude?
Still haven't.
Okay. There's some self-knowledge.
It's not easy. It's not easy. If I roll my first dodge of the game, re-roll it, and then fail, and everything falls apart, yeah, it takes a few minutes to get my mojo back.
And how quickly into playing Blood Bowl did you start to notice that rage, rather than just the joy of everything being silly? How quickly did the silly turn to, that shouldn't have happened, though?
Pretty quickly, maybe in the first couple games, probably. Maybe the third game or fourth game, where it's like, okay, I know what I'm doing now, but then I fail to execute on it, and it suddenly feels very unfair.
Okay. Duerbrouqc, how's your attitude, and how important do you think it is?
I mean, I think it's really important to, consider the psychological side of the game and not be a defeatist. And for me, it took some success to overcome that. When you roll the double skulls on that first block on turn one, and you made the mistake of not covering up the ball before you did that block, and so that gutter runner runs down and they score on their first turn. It's just so defeating, and trying to come up with some positives out of that, right? Like, okay, well, I know not to do that next time. I'm going to cover up the ball, protect the ball before I start rolling dice and learning that stuff. But even when you do all the right things, bad things can happen on turn one, turn two, and it's really easy to just give up and be like, well, I've lost this game. I can't win anymore. And for me, it was, overcoming some of those situations and being able to win or come up with a tough draw if your opponent scores twice on your half, right? And because he got the blitz and, some dice went his way and you made some bad decisions. And then in the second half, the dice go your way. He makes a couple of bad decisions and all of a sudden it's a 2-2 game, and it takes a couple of those games to kind of say, I've been here. I've seen this before, and I know that all's not lost. I can come back from this.
So you've got that resilience to the tough break scenario, where the dice are beating you down, where everything is just brutal. But did you get the rage? Because some people get the rage with that.
Oh, absolutely. You start fouling their guys, but you're like, well, if I'm going to lose, I want to make sure your best player
Spite
is
fouls.
killed. Yep.
Iconic.
Yep. I'm going to kill your best player.
Do you know the term, and would you consider far enough to say that you've actually gone on tilt whilst playing Blood Bowl? Where reason is gone and you're just after the damage, you're just rolling those dice, seeing if you can make them hurt?
Yep.
I imagine we all have at one time or another.
I've thrown away a lot of dice during tabletop games. I'll just walk right over to the waste bin and just, I'm not rolling this one ever again. So.
Okay, Salty, we seem to have covered both sides of the attitude here. Duerbrouqc's coming in with the I get beat down, but I get back up again. Nautical with a little more of the confession of when I get cross, I get cross.
I mean, it's in the name.
I was going to say, I'm going to guess from the name. Which of these is your experience? Do we need to ask?
My league is called the Salt Bowl League. The whole point is we become the most saltiest, horrible human beings to each other, but then at the end of the game, we have a hug at the end of it, and it's fine. I've thrown dice cups across the room at tournaments. It's not my proudest moment. It's happened. I've thrown dice across the room. It happens. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm oh, it's fine, everything's okay. No, I'm a full raging animal and I want to smash my team through the table. I've had enough of this. I had it in Alicante where I nearly went home after game 8 because I had to get up and walk around the hall twice in one game after 8 goals in a row. And I was just like, I went and hugged all of my team because I was tearing up from pure rage at that point. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like it's all fine. It is one of the most important things in the game, and I suck at it. It's probably the thing that I will be continuing to try and improve on. But yeah, I think you have to admit to yourself, like you got to know where your level is. I've calmed a lot over the last couple of years and sort of having a look at, what's happened here, what's gone wrong. And also a lot of it, I think we forget as well, we've all got an outside life. People have a bad day, something goes bad at work and then you go off for a league game, which you probably should postpone. But, we've all got schedules and you've committed to that time with someone else. So you don't want to let them down. But really, you should have just gone, mate, I need to just go home and have a cup of tea. I'm not in the mood for it. We've all done it. Sort of on this point as well, another one I'd say is once you start hitting the tournament scene, there will be coaches that you get to know the name of, and they're also could be streamers or they're out there in the community and you've heard the name.
You can call me a
You
dick,
will at
it's
some
fine.
point you will get drawn against that player at some point, and there is a massive thing. Play the game that is in front of you. Don't play the name that you're playing against. Every game is winnable. They could just roll skulls all game, and there's not a lot they can do. I'm sure there's probably some coaches that are that amazing that they could roll skulls and still beat me. But it's just play the game that's in front of you. Don't worry about who you're sitting down against. My example is always PC. We've played a handful of times, and every time I'm like, oh, for God's sake, it's PC again. This is a loss. And, I got him until the World Cup. He finally beat me at the World Cup, but I had an all right record before that going into it. Because I just went, sod it, it's just another game, and I'll throw the silly dice like I always do, and sometimes it works, and it did against PC, and then I got some good stories out of it.
I was fine
But
with
it's
it.
that. Play the game that's in front of you. Don't play the name that you're sitting in front of. If you sit down against Andy Davo, it doesn't matter. You can beat him. There's always a chance, and then you might be able to give him some money to sign his hat afterwards. It's fine. But I go back to my main thing being, at the end of the game, you should always shake your opponent's hand. And if you have been a bit of an idiot, at least apologise for it, or just take 2 minutes, reflect, come back to the table and be like, I'm really sorry about that. Just something else is going on, or I shouldn't have acted like that. And just own it. Like, don't pretend like, it didn't happen or anything like that. Mainly you're looking at adults playing this game. There are a few children. Generally, you're not going to be losing it over playing a child unless you should be.
You'd be amazed.
You should know better. You
You absolutely
better.
should.
But yeah, I think that's a big part of it, which I've sort of sat back on a little bit and gone, just play the game that's in front of you. And also, I'll do the classic where I'll just sit there and I'll moan and moan and moan about the dice. And then we'll get to the second half, and then the dice will turn, and then I'll just feel like an idiot because I've moaned about not breaking armor at all, and then I'll do like 5 cas in a turn and be like, well, I look like a massive idiot now because I've moaned about that for the last half an hour.
Yeah. I do think there's a strange state, this ninja warrior that you've got to try and find. For me, it helps that it's very similar to auditions. You walk in wanting it more than anything in the world, and then you've got to walk out not caring because the odds of you getting it are so slim. So you've got to live in that world where you can have those two competing. I really want this, but I don't care if it doesn't work, and that's very hard to do. And Blood Bowl, it's incredibly useful.
I have another tangent I just thought of to do with this. It's not direct. It's sort of related, but it's specifically in regards to the tenacity that comes with playing from a losing game that Duerbrouqc mentioned earlier. We both play Fumble. Does anyone here play Blood Bowl 3, like as a point of reference? Yes, you play Blood Bowl 3. So my understanding with Blood Bowl 3 is that concession is an extremely common occurrence on the ladder in that game.
Yeah.
Whereas if you play on Fumble and in-person leagues or resurrection tournaments, that is not common. In fact, it's pretty borderline unheard of. Like, I haven't had a single concession in my Fumble games so far.
In Fumble, you hopefully won't. We do police against it. It does happen.
Right.
Real life happens. People just can't deal with it anymore. They've got the right to say, I'm done.
That
but we
was
do
interesting to me,
check their
getting into
property.
the hobby though, because from other competitive games that I've played in the past, so like Magic the Gathering, Warhammer, other video games, concession is like tolerated or sometimes even depending on the format, like kind of tacitly encouraged socially. Where if you're at a sufficient enough disadvantage, it's like, well, you technically could win, but it's not worth the time, so we'll scoop and move on to the next thing. But that's not really done in Blood Bowl outside of Blood Bowl 3. But even there, people express a lot of frustration
I mean,
with
it
it.
depends. If you go to like the 2 day NAFC, then once it's game 4 and people know they're not going to be winning,
Then you
if at
might see
turn
that.
6 in the second half it's pretty much done, they might say, let's go and have a beer and call it 2-1.
Save some time.
There's a lot of that happening. So if you're up at the silly end of things, very little. But at the more social end of most tournaments, it does happen. But I agree, a lot less. Because people are still chasing, best casualty, or they want to defend their record, or see if they can get that one
Yeah.
back. And I absolutely agree with the point earlier that you learn some of the best Blood Bowl from positions where you think you're absolutely screwed, and
Playing from
somehow
behind,
you
yeah.
can, you get that draw, or you somehow get that win, and it just feels absolutely magical. So
So
yeah, attitude. I think it's really interesting. I kind of
one
hope I
last
was
piece.
always
Sorry,
sorry.
I don't want to
Yes,
cut you off.
come on in.
One last piece to wrap that back around to the original thrust of a tip, because the meme with the format is tips. If you're playing Blood Bowl 3 to learn Blood Bowl, don't snap concede from positions of disadvantage, because you're
Yeah.
denying yourself opportunities to learn one of the harder and more rewarding parts of the game, which is playing from behind. There.
I mean, one of the problems with Blood Bowl 3 is that there is a lot of that, and they've built a system at the moment where there is no punishment for conceding. You don't get the winnings from the game, you don't get the MVP, but you don't lose anything. There's no risk to you. And the reward on the other side is very low. You get the money, but you don't get the bonus MVPs, and you don't get it to award touchdowns or anything like that. So that encourages it, and also the meta they've built means it doesn't matter how many losses you've got as long as you then start to get a decent team. So even some very top streamers are building teams by just conceding the minute there's the first bit of any kind of adversity. So even if they try 3 blocks and one doesn't work, they might just concede then, because it just doesn't matter to them how many concedes there are. And it's an interesting, and I'm not sure it's something I would ever feel comfortable doing, because I would worry it would encourage others to feel that's a reasonable way to play Blood Bowl, and it just that's not what Blood Bowl's about for me. But it is that meta. I won't blame individuals for saying that's my
No.
response to the meta, because that is how the meta's been built. But I do think your attitude is something you are going to have to grasp in Blood Bowl. I've always called it the hubris engine, because no matter what plan you make, you've run that sin of your arrogance against the gods. If that first dice you need isn't the 2+ that should have obviously come with that reroll, then the whole thing falls into tatters, and you've got to start again. I remember one particular tournament against Salty, um, where if I won the game, I won the tournament. If it was a draw, I think he won the tournament. And it all came down after lots of other dice, obviously, but I had to pick up on a 3 with a reroll, and it came up a 2, rerolled to a 1. And I confess, I slammed my dice cup down quite hard, and I think I said, for fuck's sake. I then walked outside, had a cigarette, came back in, shook his hand, and was fine 5 minutes later. I don't want either of those things to be untrue. If I, at that moment, don't care about that result under the dice cup, if it doesn't move me emotionally, I don't know what I'm doing playing Blood Bowl. That's the moments I play for. Win and loss, those are the moments that will stick with me. Mostly the losses stick with me. But those are the moments, that emotional ability to alter how I feel as a human being is what I want from gaming. But 5 minutes later, I want to be over it, because otherwise, I've not got my head straight about where gaming should be in my life. Which is, it's a way of having fun. It shouldn't be determining how I live my life or how I feel about myself or about other human beings. So me and Rob have discussed it since. I think he's quite happy with both of the things I did that day, that I was upset to see the result not go my way. But it didn't change who I am as a human being, and that, I'm still prepared to tolerate his existence in this world.
Tolerate his existence in this world.
He does have an awful habit of thinking, oh, well, it's only a 6 up, I'll have a go at that. And it fucking works. And it's always the right thing to do as well. I can never go, that was stupid, because it wasn't. It was, I only left him a 6 up, so he tried the 6 up, and it fucking worked.
What are the chances of that? About 100%.
Yeah, I mean, it's how you should play Blood Bowl. If that's what you've got, that's what you should do. So I've literally never got cross. He's tried it. I've got cross. It bloody worked. But I try and move the blame there, not to the individual doing what they're doing. Okay, that's 6-5. Absolutely cracking points. We could have had a 0.6 there. I felt we almost had enough for a 0.6. from Salty, but I'm not quite counting it. Let's see if we can reach 10 without it. Let's move on. Duerbrouqc, you haven't given me one for a while. Do you have something else that you really wish you'd known back when you started Blood Bowl?
To kind of piggyback on that last one, you have to go into every game with the mindset to win, right? When you first sit down and you haven't rolled any dice yet, you got to play to win. But at some point in the game, sometimes the best outcome is a draw, and you have to try to preserve that draw, especially when you're playing in a league or a tournament where the points that you get from a draw are really important. And when I first started playing Blood Bowl, I lost a lot of games because I would try to win and be like, okay, well, if I roll 4+, 5+, 6+, I can win. But if I fail any one of the rolls, then my opponent has a 5 and 6 chance of winning the game, and then I lose. And so I think that, if you have one of those edge situations and it's, the finals of tournament, or you have to win in order to get into the playoffs, in league play, then go for it. But early in a league or a tournament, sometimes, you just got to preserve that draw, and then prevent your opponent from winning.
Okay, Duerbrouqc, I have to say I'm going to bring the others in on this because it started out sounding exactly like Salty's point of doesn't matter who you're sat down facing, play the game and the dice in front of you, not the reputation. And I thought try to win dovetails really well with that. So instead of abandoning 0.5.5, it can just become 0.6. And then what you seemed to say was sit down and play every game to win, but really accept draws all the time. Accept draws. Don't lose. Accept a draw. So I'm going to bring the others in to see what they think about this. Should we be playing to win? Should we be accepting draws? What do you wish are those bits of conflicting advice you knew when you started? I'm going to go with Nautical. Come on in.
I'm not really too sure. I think playing to win is usually a good policy. Maybe I would say more rather than the long game is good and all that, but I think when you're new and you're learning, maybe I would say it makes more sense to play to win the drive rather than the game. Winning the game is obviously the end goal, but even just planning one turn is a complicated and difficult proposition sometimes. So maybe I'll say more about that later, because I have another point that dovetails into more straight line. But yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with playing for a draw if you don't feel like winning is realistic. But at the same time, obviously, you probably start by trying to win. Ideally, you don't feel like you're so far behind that you can't conceivably pull a win under any circumstances. That would be not a good place to start a game from.
Salty, our
like
fictitious new Blood Bowl player. Sorry, Duerbrouqc, come on back in.
Yeah, I just want to qualify that. It's not so much, I'm just saying that sometimes there's a point in the game where it's not so much that you're playing for a draw, it's you're playing so that your opponent doesn't win, because there are a lot of times when I've had the draw in hand, it'd be really easy to end the game that way. And then I did something stupid, and I basically gifted my opponent the win because it was just such a long shot that it wasn't worth taking.
I've got a 3% chance of a win here, yes, but it gives my opponent a 60% chance of beating me. I shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty sage advice. Salty, let's bring you in on this. Should you sit down intending to win, or should you be willing to accept the draw? Which of those points dominates this 0.6 of things new players should know?
90% of the time, win at all costs. But is there a silly option on the table, or is there a fun option on the table? I drew a game at the last tournament I went to in London in the last round because I had the opportunity to pitch clear lizards. So I went for the foul before scoring on turn 16 and then rolled boxcars. And I was like, yeah, I could have won. I was like in the sort of mix for top 4 sort of area. I was like, it's more fun with me and my opponent if I pitch clear him because I've diced the hell out of him already. Yeah. So at least he'll have a smile if I pitch clear him. Where if I just walk it in for 1-0, I'm like, it doesn't do anything for me because I'm not going to win the tournament, which is why I've gone to the tournament other than seeing house. So why not have a giggle with my opponent? We got some interest because it was like, we're going to see a double, or we're going to see a double. And then I just slammed down boxcars and was like, well, that was stupid. But then I cleared him into the KO box and it was my first ever pitch clear. So I'll take it and I was happy. So it depends. But most of the time I'm going to be win at all costs because I want those trophies.
Okay, I mean, I'm going to make the point then, if we're going to summate this point, sit down thinking you can win whatever that game is. Do we
Yeah,
all
I
agree
also
with
think
that?
as a new coach,
Yeah.
Even
I
if
also
you're
think as a
goblins
new
versus
coach,
wood elves, sit down and think, I can still win this game.
yeah, and as a new coach,
Yeah.
you should be pushing for the win early anyway, because you're going to get more reps of offensive drives, which are probably harder to figure out than defensive drives, because defensive drives are normally going to be column defense, or they're fairly straightforward of not leaving gaps through your line. Whereas offense is a lot more difficult to grasp as a newer player
Yeah,
on
for sure.
either caging. Well, I'm sure we'll get onto caging later, because if we don't mention that, what's the
Yeah,
point?
we've not done our job if that doesn't crop up.
So I think that's the big part of it. Is I've completely lost my train of thought here. Win all costs. Just win the game.
Well,
Play
sit
win
down
the game in
ready
front
to
of
win
you.
the game, trying hard
Never
to win the
surrender.
game. One of the tough things I always find in Blood Bowl is knowing when to change gear. And I do think that's, while you should sit down and think and believe and be planning to win that game, I agree with Duerbrouqc. There is a time to say, now it's time to change gear and think, how do I not lose this game? And that can be a real goal as well. And that can be a learning experience, and it can be tough to do. And it might put you back in a position to suddenly start to think, I could win this game again. But I think
wanna
there is a
add
time to
something,
be realistic about that. Coming in.
to add something to my answer, because you mentioned if there's a fun or silly option
Yeah.
that comes up, and I don't think that should be understated in Blood
No,
Bowl, because
absolutely.
sometimes you get an opportunity to surf somebody, and maybe you're going to overinvest your resources into accomplishing that goal, and maybe it's worth it because it makes the game more fun for you.
And I think particularly when you're new, putting some value into those things you haven't done before, like pulling off a surf, pulling off a two-turn, perhaps, when you haven't ever done a two-turn before, let alone a one-turn.
Right.
Or doing a lovely meaty foul that takes someone they've been using centrally to their entire game plan, takes them off the pitch. Even in turn 15, you can maybe walk away with a smile on your face because of that. So sit down to win every game, but be prepared to find other goals, even if it's drawing or doing something fun, and accept that that might be your learning that day. I think that's a nice point to know when you start Blood Bowl. Lots of nodding around. Excellent. We have point 6. Only one more before we need to blow their minds with point 8. I may have overpromised there. I'm aware of that. Who's going to come in with a point 7 for me? What else should this fictitious, just starting to learn Blood Bowl player know now that you salty old hacks know at this time in your Blood Bowling?
Whose turn is it? Are we keeping
Anyone's.
track?
You've each had 2 goes now, so now I don't mind. Who's got one they think we haven't covered and we should right now?
I have a decent one. Oh, sorry, no.
Go on, I'll throw one out there. So, and again, I'll name drop my pal Rory, who I went to the World Cup with, taught me this fairly early on. Knowing when to stand your players up once they've been knocked down. Because when you're a new player, you just forget you've got players on the floor. You'll make a block, you'll roll dub skulls, and you didn't progress anything. This kind of falls into making your safe moves first. So doing stuff that doesn't involve dice rolls, do that stuff first, get it out of the way. A lot of the time, coaches will say to you, oh, just stand your players up first, get them back in the game. Most of the time, yes. There is sometimes you might want to leave that player on the ground because you might be able to clear a player off of them, and then they might be able to get up and move away from where they are. A lot of the time, you're just going to stand them up and just get them back in the game, or just tag someone up with them so they can't get away from them. But knowing when to stand them up is quite an important part, and it's quite a small little finesse part of the game.
So you think right at the start, instead of the rule that everyone always hears, first thing you do, stand all your players up and then work out where your blitz is, that actually even at the start you should be thinking, who do I stand up and when do I stand them up?
Yes. Don't just auto pick them all up. Another point is, especially for newer players, and this is one that I thought was absolutely bonkers, even if you're about to just walk the ball in on turn 16 unimpeded, stand all your players up first. It just gets you in the habit of doing it. So even if there's no chance you're not scoring, just stand them up. It's going to take you 10 seconds, and it's just getting it in your mind that you just stand up players. Remember to stand up players. Because we've all done it. You'll get to turn like 13, 14, 15.
Yep.
You're in a crucial part of the game. You're trying to get the score in for the win, or you're trying to stave them off. And you're like, right, there's the blitz. That's what I need to do. I've got a 1D on the ball. Let's do that. And then you throw it, you roll the skull, and you're like, I've got like 4 players on the floor that could have made like a column defense and made this so much better for myself.
So you didn't
And you
consider
just
your
get
fail
caught in the
state.
moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it comes down to that beautiful fail state, doesn't it? Duerbrouqc, if someone had told you very early on, don't stand all your players up instantly. Think about when they're standing up and what they're doing. Would that have helped?
So I played my first game of Blood Bowl in August with my brother-in-law, and then he helped me pick out a team. And I picked out a team basically based on what they looked like. So I picked Elven Union, and proceeded to lose a lot of games with the
And
Elven
it doesn't
Union.
really have that problem because they're not there to stand back up once they get hit, are they?
Yeah, but
Not
a
a
lot of
luxury
times
they
you
have.
don't want to just stand up Elven Union. You want to stand and dodge them away. So the timing is really important of when you stand them up, right? And so,
So is it?
getting.
Would you say that elves are better at teaching you when things should be standing up then?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think it's really
It's a
important
shame.
as a beginning player to try to play a lot of different teams to learn because
Okay.
having started with Elven Union, I rarely blocked. So it was really hard for me to understand assists and how to get a 2 dice block and when I had an uphill block and stuff like that. And when I switched to orcs or switched to shambling undead and I was in a scrum more often, I learned, how all that stuff works. So, I think with elves, yeah, it does help you kind of manage that. Whereas I feel like when you're playing some of the more bashy teams, it's like, yeah, stand up your guys, right? Because they're just going to stand up, unless you're going to blitz with that person, just stand them up because you're probably not going to try a 3 or 4 plus dodge, most of the time. Whereas with the elves, you don't really want them to stand up and get hit again and with 8+ armor die,
Yeah, I think that's true. A lot
so
of your AV9 or your Strength 4 pieces are going to just stand up and take the next hit. That's their job, isn't it? Is to be a wall of meat. But your elves, it isn't. They're almost certainly going to, instead of just stand up, they're probably going to be dodging off. So getting that turn ordering right when they stand up can be really important. Nautical, would this advice have helped you? Don't stand everyone up at the very, very start of the turn, but do get them all stood up as soon as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just kind of fits into the larger scheme of how you plan through a turn. At the very beginning, at the very very beginning of a player's journey, it's probably safe, assuming they're learning with one of the better bash teams. It's probably safe to have them just stand up their players first. Like if they're playing orcs, you can just say just stand up your guys and they go from there. Eventually, they will realize that that's not always correct, but I mean, it's a fundamental part of the learning process, right? Like finding the blitz before you start just moving pieces around, standing stuff up, taking dodges and risks, making the ball safe before doing other things. All those things like kind of connect together into the anatomy of how you plan a turn.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's make sure that we are considering well when we're going to stand people up. At the very start, perhaps particularly if we've got that armor or that strength, just getting up in people's faces, so that's done. But just getting into that habit of making sure everyone's up if that's all they're doing, and if not, we've thought about who's getting up and when. I agree with Salty, there's nothing worse than in the heat of battle doing just what looks like the perfect thing to do, because it's all there for the taking. And as you do it, you think, there's 4 things I should have done first, isn't there? And I've already rolled some dice. However, don't do everything first because the situation might change once you blitz. You might need people to pick up. You might need people to remove and shield somewhere, screen somewhere. But take those as active decisions. Don't just let it be, oh, well, I haven't moved them yet because I forgot. Not an ideal way to go through. Let's have a point 7. Or was that
All
point
right,
7? That was point
I've got a
7,
point
wasn't it?
seven or an 8 now, eh? This is the
Yeah,
big one.
this is 8. This is the big one. Who's got a
Oh.
mind blower for me?
All right, mind blower. All right, I think this one's really important, and
Good.
hopefully you guys agree.
Because they're never going to believe this one.
It's
Is it? Make sure if you're at a tabletop event with him, you
Well,
pay €10 to get a selfie with Andy Davo. It's good
it
value.
is not. That
Damn.
is not what I was going for. I think it actually follows on really well from the idea of like standing up players, planning turns, taking actions in the correct sequence. Clock management. This one I would say is not one of the more intuitive things to learn as a new Blood Bowl player. The idea that basically everything that you do on every turn is trying to bring you closer to scoring at the time that you want to score. So the risks that you take and the actions that whether or not you're basing people or making dodges or advancing the cage or trying to break the cage, all comes down to essentially what turn it is on the clock. That one is not as often talked about as more kind of rudimentary mechanics, things like the math on blocks, basic positioning, caging, of course, the ordering of stuff like finding the blitz, protecting the ball. A lot of that stuff comes up early, but how you actually put all those things together into a successful drive is very much informed by the clock, like getting your critical players into scoring position on the turn that you need them to score to prevent your opponent from then scoring back, and having a 1-1 drive or a 1-1 half. That's like, it's not intuitive. It's not easy to learn, I would say. At least it wasn't for me.
I'm going to come to Salty last here because I think he, like me, may have heard something else when he heard clock management.
Oh, you
And
mean
then I
like
think
playing
we've
faster?
segued slightly into what I'm thinking of more as drive management.
Sure.
But I know exactly what you mean. It's where are you in that drive? Where do you need to be to ensure you're in scoring range? Two of the numbers I've always had in my head is, first of all, just what are the raw numbers? What have they got on the pitch and what have I got on the pitch? Because even if my pieces are crap, if I've got 11 of them and they've got 4, I'm probably in a good position. So I'm trying to always keep the numbers in my head. And the second one is, if I've got the ball, how far am I from the touchdown line? Is it a move? Is it a move in GFIs? Or am I out of range? And if they've got the ball, how far are they from the touchdown line? Is it a move? Is it a move in GFIs? Is it out of range? And those are the first bits of information I always make sure are in my head at the start of every turn. Duerbrouqc, do you agree that drive management and where that clock is in terms of the drive is an important thing to be considering at the start of your Blood Bowl?
Lists, you got to pay attention to the time because turn 8 and turn 16 comes around fast, and you just have to make sure that, especially when you enter turn 7 and 8, that you give yourself a chance to win, right? As a new player, a lot of times I would get to turn 8 and then realize it was impossible for me to score. I should have moved someone a little bit closer, to the end zone or whatever. And that was especially so on defense, where I didn't give myself a chance to win on defense, where, I got the ball back, but then, I didn't have someone, in position that I could throw to or hand off to score. And I could have won the game, but then I had to settle for the draw or whatever, because I didn't give myself a chance to win because I wasn't paying attention to the clock.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I would add to if we're talking about that clock control, is know when, particularly as an agile team, you should have what we always call a scoring threat, or in the Blood Bowl 2 and 3 world, a canoring threat. Get a player into range, just because you never know what happens late in a drive, and having someone you can get the ball to that can score is probably going to be quite useful if you've got the numbers to do that. You won't always have the numbers. But absolutely, knowing where you are in terms of the shape of the game with that clock is important. But Salty, did you, like me, hear 2 times of clock at the same time with that? I
Yeah.
know that the other guys have a multiplicity of experience. They are poly bowlers, a beautiful thing to be, playing multiple forms of the game. You've played a little bit of fumble, I think, but you're mostly a tabletop player, I believe. Is that true?
Yeah, mainly. Well, I've played some BB3,
Okay.
just a hand. It's not grabbed me enough that I'll stick with it. I keep being tempted in by fumble, but I'm not the best with tech. But I will, at some point, I will give in and give it a shot.
Well, as the others have talked up the 145, I'm going to mention it. It's a lovely place to, even if you're experienced at Blood Bowl, try a couple of games against in a non-competitive environment with people there that are all trying to help. And I think that's a really good way to get comfortable with the client, with Fumble, and with Blood Bowl, whichever of those is your need. So when I hear clock management, I was thinking drive management, but also the timing of a game. Did you hear the same? And what did you want to say about those?
Yeah. So I did have this as one of my points. More going back to really fresh players, but I remember my first game. It's like 6 hours. Like trying to figure through the rules and how long your first, it's a joke. Like it's literally you have to play it over like 2 days. I played against a league commissioner in a league once where we had to play it over 2 nights because the first half was like 5 hours, and I was like, "What are we doing here? Like I've got a life outside of this, mate. Like I've got to go home."
I signed up for a game, not for a week with you. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, "You're supposed to be like one of the commissioners of this league." I was like, "Oh my lord." But yeah, you should be playing in a timely manner. As a new coach, take your time, learn the game, but don't think every game of Blood Bowl is going to be 6 hours like it is when you first start playing. It does speed up when you get used to the mechanics of the game. It does speed up a bit. Normal tournament play should most of the time is 2.5 hours or 2 hours 15. I think that works out about 4 minutes a turn if you ignore setups and rolling for weather and all that sort of stuff. You should aim to be around that. But within that, you'll generally find there will be the crunch turns where you spend a little bit longer on, and there'll be the turns where you don't really have to do a lot, so it'll take 30 seconds. You'll either just move back a column defense and go turn, or you do the classic where they've got hack phlegm and you both just sit there for 7 turns, and then they try and do the one turner and the half takes 10 minutes. It's lovely. But it's knowing Blood Bowl does not always take 6 hours like it does when you first start playing the game. It does. You get quicker, and your opponents will hopefully get quicker with you, and you should bang out a league game in like 3 hours with a ciggy break and a beer break at half time.
And a tournament game usually either 2.25 to 2.5 hours because it's a bit more focused, a bit less social. Online, you should be expected to get your fumble games down to about an hour. Blood Bowl 3 seems to be coming in about that, maybe an hour 10. Blood Bowl 2 is about the same, a little bit longer, but not massively so. But it will obviously all be slower when you start. So in terms of that level of clock management, give yourself that freedom to know it will get quicker, it will get better. It is a complex game, but it all starts to settle in fairly quick. What about that drive clock management?
I will quickly just throw in there as well that kind of going into the tournament clock and stuff like that. So many players are scared of that, and like just throw yourself in. I know so many people that have like thought that they're not ready for a tournament or they're not sure. Just throw yourself in. Like, just be honest with the TO and let the TO know it's like my first tournament. I'm a bit worried about like playing to time. I'll let my opponents know it's my first one and go from there. But just throw yourself in, give it a go, because if you don't try, you're never going to get there. Just play.
And everyone's there doing the same thing. You'd be amazed. There's almost certainly going to be someone else that's either new or.
And also, you'll play against players that have been playing for a couple of years, and some of the games, your opponent will take 45 minutes, and you'll get the other hour and a half.
And how important is that in-game management as well? The clock in the game, where you're looking at, do I go over turn 16? Am I in range on 15 and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you see a lot of new coaches doing is like just going for the ball carrier on like turn 15, 16, but the ball carrier can't score. Whereas they'll have a threat in the backfield that they'll just be like, well, they don't have the ball, it's fine. Really, you blitz that guy, get him on his bum, and the scoring threat's gone. But they just sort of get stuck on the ball. Most of the game, you're just hunting for that ball, trying to pop the ball out. But when you get to sort of turn 15, 16, you need to be, like you said earlier, counting out the squares, which players can still score. Can I just push this player back and then they're out of scoring range? If I push them back, is it another go for it, or is it a dodge out to get round me? Don't just get stuck going, there's the ball, that's what I'm going for, because I've seen players lose games on that and it's painful.
One of the things that always occurred to me that people often don't seem to see when they start, I think particularly North American coaches, where obviously a draw is seen very much like sex with your sister in North America, and by that I don't mean something that's absolutely fine in certain states. I mean something they find completely unnatural and strange. In Blood Bowl, in a defence, you've got really, the goal isn't necessarily to turn them over and score. My first goal is the stop. If I stop you scoring and I have the ball in the second half, I'm probably winning the game. Now, obviously, a stretch goal is if I can stop you and turn you over, then it's even better for me. But I see so many coaches putting all the eggs in the basket of that turnover score, rather than just thinking, actually, job one is to stop you scoring. And it's a very conservative goal, but I think that can be helpful for newer players to hear about as well. So fantastic. As number 8, our exciting, you won't believe this number 8, manage your clock, or it will all go horribly wrong.
It was just the 2-1 grind all along.
Yeah. The number of times, it happened to me the other day, I was playing it was at the World Cup, a really challenging game. And he did absolutely everything to try and stall out for one more turn and go in on turn 8. But in the end, he had to go in on turn 7, leaving me a 2-turner. And I thought, I was, what was I at the World Cup? I was Dark Elves. So yeah, the 2-turners, it's quite possible with Dark Elves, but as they don't pass, it needs to be a handoff. So you do need probably the right kick. And, he had a full team. So he had lots of ways that he could get in ahead of me and stop me. And then he set up and I realised, that's why he was pushing it hard. He has absolutely no idea how to stop a 2-turner. Just none at all. So that was a lovely, lovely win. So yeah, know where the clock is and use it and be in range. And at the same time, know there's a physical clock, particularly if you're playing on tabletop. And just be slightly aware of that. Who wants to come in with a 0.9 for us? We've only 2 left, and then we must stop. We definitely can't have an 11th point, honest.
I just went when you guys got something.
Duerbrouqc, let's hear one from you. We haven't had one for a while. There must be something else on your list of homework.
When I first started playing, I wish, someone had told me that, your best players are also the number one targets, so don't hang them out to dry. When I first played Wood Elves, I mean, that War Dancer is so awesome. I'd go out there and blitz with him and leave him out there on an island. And even risk-adverse coaches are going to want to foul a War Dancer or a gutter runner on the ground. And so, I wasn't protecting my players, and they would just get hurt, and then you wouldn't have them for a couple of games. So,
And were you surprised by the high turnover of your better players?
yeah,
I don't know
especially on Fumble.
Everyone else
They're
has
just
these
ruthless.
war dancers with 5 or 6 skills, and mine last a game or maybe 2. Why is that? Salty, were you hanging your best players out to dry?
He's a pro.
No. Well, I learned caging pretty early, so sort of, yeah. You see, there's a reason they cost more money than the other players on the team. It kind of seems sensible to me. I'm like, oh, the ogre's 150. I probably shouldn't just leave him on his own to get smashed and fouled every turn. Comes a little bit later. You're not going to be doing that game 1 of your Blood Bowl career, but 10, 15 games in, once someone realises how powerful fouling can be, yeah, don't do that. Especially in League, because there's nothing worse than someone killing your big guy. I did it this season. I felt really bad about it. I killed a blood spawn, and he didn't have an Apo, and it was just like, oh, there's a 16. He's just dead. Good luck with the rest of your season, mate. Did it in game 1 against the coach that had just come into the league, killed a Black Hawk game 1. I was just like, sorry, mate, game's a game, innit?
Yeah, but it's kind of horrible when that's a whole miserable season that person's now facing. As you say, it's going to be 3 or 4 games
Yeah,
till
but
they get it back, and even then it's going to be new. And
it was a story, and then he did it. He played this league, and then played a new coach, and then just killed one of his players game 1, and was just like swings and roundabouts, and that's what it is. It swings and roundabouts. You're going to kill someone's big guy, and someone's going to kill your big guy.
Sorry, yes, I think it's important. I mean, you said about fun in the other point we were talking about. I think it's a story is a great thing to say. Remember, that's what we play games for. It's those moments that you tell someone about another time and go, oh, you never guess how it happened. And then this guy died. And then I rolled 6 skulls in a row. That's a great story. It will be horrible to do when you roll 6 skulls in a row. But what a story to tell sometimes. And actually, isn't that why we're in gaming? Is for those fun moments, not just for the wins. If you just want to write, I've won lots of stuff on a piece of paper and get your mum to think you're special, Blood Bowl perhaps isn't the way to do that. Because, get good at chess and you will win. But in Blood Bowl, you still won't sometimes. So it won't help. Right, best players. Let's hear about best players and them getting targeted from NaticalSoup. Do we need to hide our best players? Do we need to be careful with them?
Yeah, I mean, I learned this the hard way. I played in a 145 Cup, my first miniature tournament, with my semi-developed human team, and I had a random guard ogre. I don't know. I don't remember why I random strength with him. Don't do that. But pretty decent piece, and he got gang fouled by dirty players, sneaky kid gutter runner, and I lost that game basically because I allowed a bunch of critical players, including my Mighty Blow tackle blitzer, to become isolated and gang fouled out. There's really no reason to do that. I was too aggressive. Wheeling back to drive management, I was trying to score too aggressively. I didn't need to. I had more muscle than my opponent. Should have just advanced the team up much more cautiously and protected those important players so that I had them in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, you're only going to... There are times to throw those best players under the bus. Even in a league, but particularly, obviously, in a resurrection format. But learning when those are, and as you said, not losing them on turn 2 or turn 3 for your first 8 games, is a really important tip, I think, that new players need to learn. I think it's one that most people will pick up fairly quickly. The first time you play a necromantic team, anyone that knows what they're doing will hit you with the wolf, and the wolf will run away. And you suddenly go, oh yeah, why don't I do that with all of my good players? again, and we've all been there, we've all seen it. And then suddenly on every team you've got one designated hitter who does all of your blitzes. And then you realise you've taken 1 point and you've over-focused on it. And actually there needs to be still a bit more variety, a bit more choice as to where you hit. Otherwise you're too predictable, and otherwise it's all your eggs in one basket. I think it's a great point, though, that some of those big players that make the big plays for us, if we leave them at risk, they're going to disappear. That only leaves us with one more. We have promised 10. Let's get that done, and then we'll talk about what we've missed. So what's the other big thing that you wish you'd known back when you started Blood Bowl? Who's got one we cannot miss off the Big 10?
I have one that might be okay.
Nautical,
maybe.
let's go for it.
Learning materials. Blood Bowl, you can get a lot of iffy advice very easily all over the internet. There's a lot of opinions. A lot of them apply to older versions of the game. Sometimes they're current, sometimes they're not. You won't be able to discriminate between the two. So, like, finding the place where you can get learning materials that are current and useful is, like, surprisingly difficult. Like, there's so many different Blood Bowl communities, and they all have their figures and influencers, and there's people making YouTube videos, there's Reddit threads, Facebook threads, Discord, and even if you just ask like the best players on Fumble a simple question that should have a straightforward answer, like should I take a thrower in orcs, and you get like you just start a flame war. So like finding the places where you can learn the critical fundamental mechanics is like harder than I think it might sound. I like, just as an example, when I started, there's like a list of things that I found later that I would have been really good to have known in like the first dozen games. Double Skulls, the art of blocking, still very, very relevant to the decision-making calculus of when to base people in block. The 1,000 Losses playbook by Wrecker. Again, it's older, but it's still really current. Jackass Rampant just put up on Fumble. He has the complete guide to defensive setups, which is a fantastic resource for how to arrange people for those defensive halves, which is not, once you learn how to put down like a chevron or something, but like there's a lot more to it than that. Understanding how to actually successfully defend against different types of teams, and he goes into great depth with that. Nuffle's playbook has really good visual guides on surfing and frenzy surfing. And tragically, he lost interest in the game almost immediately after posting those videos, but they're still really, really good for learning how to see surfs. Being able to see surfs is one of those like skill thresholds in Blood Bowl, I think. That's really
Andy
significant.
Davo may have done a video or two about that.
Oh yeah, that's true. He has too. Yeah, his is really good. I've seen Andy give up a drive just to get extra surfs.
We all have. I mean, I would add to that list myself. I think the Blood Bowl, BB Tactics and BB Strategies are two very, very good sites with some really nice articles on them. The one that Phil King Ghidra puts things into,
Hammer.
Goonhammer. Yeah, Goonhammer is very, very good too. There's lots of nice articles on there. Ask people, yes. I think it's important to find, first of all, good sources that are written down that you can absorb in your own time. If that's how you learn, and not everybody does, but if that's how you can receive information, I think that's a great thing to do. So spend some time reading and thinking, as well as watching other people play and playing yourself. I think all of those are really important strands to getting better, particularly right at the start. Once you start to work out, oh, hang on, guard is useful, but there's other things I can do even I don't have it, then reading a book, a thesis written on how to get lots of support and how to build things can really help your thinking leap forwards as well. Even if there's things you don't agree with, you'll come back, reread them later, and perhaps change your mind. I think it is good that there's good sources out there. I also agree that not everybody giving you advice gives you the best advice. I do think on the 145 we try and make sure the advice there is good and pure and honest of heart and trying to help people. But I've seen some advice given on streams that I think is frankly horrific. So find a source that you trust and that seems to understand how you want to play, or that plays how you want to play, and listen to them. But be careful. If you ask 10 people in Blood Bowl a simple question, you're likely to get 11 or 12 answers. Not just 10. I think that's a fantastic point 10. Get good resources. Well, there we are. Those are 10 things we wish we'd known when we started Blood Bowl. So we've got... it's a bit dark for me to read all of this. Reroll management. You just suck, and remember that. You'll get better. Don't play the Season 2 box. It's got two terrible teams in it that you won't enjoy learning Blood Bowl with. The game starts before you roll dice, so do have a think about your setups and your team and your bits and bobs before you even roll a dice. Get your attitude right. Be prepared to take some of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortunes, as Rocky said. No, not Rocky. Was it? Was it Rocky? It's not about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can be hit, and keep moving forward. That's how winners are
Rocky.
made. Yeah, that is Rocky. I always thought that was quite a good quote, actually, about durability, about resilience. But that, yes, Blood Bowl is going to make you rage, and when it does, deal with it, accept it, find a way of hopefully getting rid of it so it doesn't impact on you or how you coach the game. But do accept that something you enjoy is going to motivate you, it's going to move you, it's going to make you have feelings. That's why you are gaming in the first place. Where was I? Attitude, yes. So get your attitude right. Every game, sit down trying to win, but accept that you might have other goals during the game. So also fight for the draw. Don't give away a win, looking for a long shot chance to win. Perhaps sometimes accept the draw. Perhaps sometimes learn something, do something fun, achieve something you've not done in Blood Bowl before. Have a TTM touchdown where you've thrown a little goblin and he's scored a touchdown. That might be your best story of that night. And if it is, then perhaps that's something you can come away with having learnt and enjoyed. And when you're new, those little milestones can really help feeling that you're getting your head around the game. Stand up people at the right time, not necessarily at the very start of your turn, but ensuring that you've noted what race you are, whether those people are standing up to get hit, or if they're elves, are they dodging out, and if so, in what order. Clock management. Firstly, of course, about the drive, the clock within the game. Where are you and where do you need to be in order to make sure that what you're trying to achieve gets done, whether that's stopping them or turning them over or scoring yourself. If you don't have enough turns left to get over the touchdown line, doesn't matter if you take their ball away. But also, if you're playing on the tabletop, there's another clock. There's a clock outside of the in-game clock. Keep an eye on that one too, and don't worry, it will get better once you learn how to do some of the things that now feel like it takes a million things to think about to get done, and 85 dice rolls. It probably doesn't. Number 9, we had... Yes, your best players. Try not to leave them so they can be easily targeted back. Because whilst you may have weaker players that are easier to take out, if they get a chance to take out your big killer, your big game-deciding piece, you could absolutely bet they are going to go for it. And then number 10, get yourself some good resources, some good material to help you move forwards, to learn, to challenge your thinking, to get you thinking as perhaps some of the experienced coaches do. And that may also accelerate your journey into Blood Bowl. We did 10 points, gentlemen. They were fantastic. What have we missed? What is on your lists or your minds? Sorry.
Just put the ball in the middle of the board. Don't get clever.
What,
if
with
you
the
put
kick?
the ball somewhere other than the middle, yeah, exactly.
Kick it on the centre head, the head of that piece they've set up in the middle.
Right there, on top of his head.
Do we agree? Kick to the middle, Salty?
You've got kick. Unless you've got kick.
Unless you've got kick.
Yeah, if you must, yeah.
There is space to keep it on the pitch if you go one left or one right. Should we not consider this as a jaunty alternative? No, because it does make it more likely to bounce out. Yeah, just put it in the middle. Okay, so bonus tips, just put it in the middle. Who else has got bonus tips? Anything for me, Duerbrouqc?
More fun with friends.
Definitely. It's a very hard game to play on your own, either online or on tabletop. So yeah, Blood Bowl is more fun with friends. I think that's a lovely, lovely point. It's also impossible without friends, or at least enemies that are prepared to face you. So always remember there's another human, and that your fun is only happening because they're prepared to spend at least an hour in your company trying to have fun as well. So even when you do get salty, remember there's someone there that they're just trying to play a game too. They're not directly responsible for how shit your plans and your dice have been. Some of that is on you, some of it's random, but almost none of it's on them. Salty, what have we missed? What are our bonus points?
I've got a couple. I'll go through them quickly. So knowing your team's play style, especially as an earlier coach, knowing the difference between a bash team, a hybrid team, and an edge team massively helps. If you're trying to play elves and outbash your opponent, it probably isn't going to go too well with the dwarves. Have a bit of a basic idea of what your team is trying to achieve. Generally, if you've got someone in the league who's played the team that you want to play, go and ask them questions. I just started on Undead and just popped in the chat and was like, any tips starting on Undead, to a couple of guys that have played him in a few seasons. And it was like, on defense, don't put mummies on the line. And I was like, I definitely would have just slapped them straight on the line as big strength 5 pieces, and it was a really good bit of advice. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask people that you know have played races quite a bit. Also, try and learn a little bit of all the teams, so you've got a bit of an idea when you sit down against your opponent of what they're going to be trying to sort of do. And especially now with so many stars in the game, having an idea of what kind of star is turning up, that definitely helps. Again, these are ones that are probably in the back end of this section as you get a bit deeper in, especially with tournament play as well, because you will see a lot more stars once you start playing tourney bowl.
Yeah, we slightly missed it, so I just want to come back because you reminded me with the stars. When we're talking about get good materials and use them, I'm a huge fan of the website daddydemurder.com,
Yeah,
the Italian site, because it lists all the inducements and all the stars, and I can't remember them all. So if I've got to look up a quick special, I can do it on there in 2 or 3 clicks, and I can instantly go, oh, blimey, they do that, all right. And it just keeps means I feel I've got that information at my fingertips. So
and it always
find
feels
good
really bad
materials.
when you miss a skill on something, which brings me into my next point very quickly, which is skill bands. There's like the generic colours that most people use, which generally we try and use. So blue for block, green for guard, white for wrestle. I think tackle is normally sort
Yellow,
of
isn't
yellow
it?
or orange.
The dodge yellow.
Yeah, dodge is
Dodge is yellow.
yellow. Tackle is
Tackle's
normally
orange.
orange. Yeah, you've got the sort of basic ones that are there. Try and stick with those colours. If you've got a whole team, if you put 4 block on them and you've just put all different sort of bands on them, it's just confusing for your opponent. Or the classic, you turn up to a tournament and someone just goes, well, all those guys have got blocks, so I didn't put bands on them. Mate, your models aren't, they could be anything. Like there's a lot of the time you'll sit down and it won't be a Games Workshop team and they're just like, oh yeah, that's a blitzer. I'm like, is it? That looks like Geodude to me, mate. So we need something better than that. So
Even
being,
better, write the position on the base if there's some ambiguity. That's
yeah.
always helpful.
Well, I mean, most of the
So just,
boxes come with little stickers, and you can even, if you don't have them,
Mhm.
if you go on eBay for £2 or £3, someone is selling the stickers for pro elves or for dwarves or whatever.
yeah. So I think just making it clear to you and your opponent what is what piece, what skills that piece has got, especially when you just get into the game, when you start playing a league and people are just putting any old coloured skill band on, and it's just like, I can't remember what colours, what here, or what that is, and I'm constantly slowing you down because you're asking what skills on that one, what skills on that one, and also don't be afraid to ask because they should have banded their stuff better. So just ask every turn and then they'll learn. Um, yeah, just make it clear to your opponent.
Okay, what else have we missed? We do need to start wrapping up or thinking about it. We've had an hour and a half of this. We put some fantastic content out there. It's already way too long for YouTube, and even the people that listen to the podcast have done at least 2 commutes to and from work by now. So I'm just going to go around and ask if there's anything you want to say to the world about your time in Blood Bowl before we wrap up, and then I will do us a close. I'm going to start rather unfairly with Duerbrouqc. Duerbrouqc, what have we missed, or what do you want to say to the world of Blood Bowl about your Blood Bowling experiences to date?
That people are super nice and they'll be happy to explain why you suck, why they crush your soul. So if you just ask, what should I have done or why did you do what you did, they'll be happy to explain most of the time.
Yeah, with that comes being humble enough to ask in the first place, doesn't it?
Yep.
So it is part of that accepting you suck again, and as part of that you can say, okay, so why did I suck? What can I do better next time? For me, it'll be the 3rd time, but eventually, what can I learn to not maybe do? NaticalSoup. Nautical, what have we missed or not covered? What do you want to say to the world of Blood Bowl?
The last point was a really, really important one, to just ask lots of questions, because Blood Bowl's an old game with a big, well-established player base, so you're almost always going to be playing somebody with more experience than you, and not just like a little bit more, like magnitudes more experience, and they'll probably have just a lifetime's worth of experience that they can bestow on you if you just ask. A secondary small point that maybe isn't super relevant to everybody, but there's a lot to learn in the game of Blood Bowl. So if you want to cut down on how much front-loaded memorization you have to do, you don't need to learn stuff like half the skills, maybe even 3/4 of the skills in the game are very uncommon. Like you need to know the big ones, like block, dodge, guard, mighty blow, tackle, wrestle. The ones that were referenced in the skill bands before there. Once you know those, you can kind of just figure out the rest as you go along.
Yeah, I think
like
people
bump
are going
into
to
a guy and
mind
it's like,
if you pull out your phone and start going on the Samba action calculator whilst playing them at a tournament. But I don't think people are going to mind if
yeah.
you pull out a rule book or have a look at what a skill is. I think
Mm,
that's accepted, that's knowledge you should be able to just find out if you want to. So,
ideally, yeah.
so there's a good line there, but most people are going to be
Ask your
saying,
opponent what
it's fine.
clause does. Like, if you've
Yeah,
never seen it before, it's fine. You don't need to memorize it all over your first few games. You'll pick it up as you go.
yeah, absolutely. It is osmosis in over time, and actually, as you said, the vast majority of teams, the vast majority of turns and actions only revolve around half a dozen skills mainly. Salty, what have we missed? What have we not covered? What do you want to say to the? I say the world of Blood Bowl. There's about 80 people that listen to this. So what do you want to say to them?
Play better coaches. Just play better coaches. If someone's beating you comfortably every time, just keep playing them until they're just beating you. Keep playing until you're getting a draw.
Does that
Pokemon
count
taught
if
us
they're
well as
just having very
youngsters.
unlucky draws against you?
Well, if you keep doing it, they can't all be unlucky draws.
Oh, can't they?
Okay.
But also, I think Pokemon taught us a good thing. It's good to have a rival. So I've got a couple of guys that I've always we're always edging draws, or it's always like a couple of wins either side. That friendly rivalry, like we'll throw down on practice games, or we'll like before we go to a tournament, we'll go through a couple of games because we know we're about the same level. So it's generally going to be the skill and the dice will average out a little bit, and you also set yourself a competition. One of the guys that I played, I won a NAF trophy. He won a NAF trophy at the last event. So now it's like, right, who's getting the next one? And you push on off of that and use that as a sort of, no, you've got too many PC.
I don't.
But I think having like someone that's around your level or moving up with someone and aiming to, if that's what you're in Blood Bowl for, is to, improve yourself as you go on and win trophies and stuff like that. I'm sure everyone could think of someone that they've got as a rival, or they always have a close game, or a coach they haven't beat and they really want to beat. It just helps you progress. I think that's it really. Roll pals.
Yeah, roll sixes and pals. That makes it a very easy
Roll sixes,
game.
pals. Take the trophy and run.
Mine, I guess there's one point I did want to make, and it isn't really, this is the wrap up in case you haven't guessed it. It isn't really coming from things I wish I knew at the very start, but it's things I wish everyone sort of knew at the start. So there you are. I'm going to be the patriarchal person who once has sat down at a NAF tournament and played someone and said, so have you played a lot of Blood Bowl? They went, yeah, I'm very experienced. I've played 40 games. I thought that's mightily experienced. They said, what about you? And I said, well, I don't have an exact count, but it is nearing 10,000. And that sort of changed how they felt about their 40. That's not the point I wanted to make. That was just a little brag in passing. The point I want to make is that in Blood Bowl, it's a beautiful game. One of the things I love about it is it's a game that you can do all sorts in, both online and on the tabletop. You might be a hobbyist. You might enjoy painting something and then just playing that team. You might be trying super hard. You might be trying to have fun. You might be after killing things. You might be after the best fouling or the best painted. In Blood Bowl, whether it's online or tabletop, you are free to have whatever kind of fun you want to have. But the big thing to remember, particularly at the start, is so's the other coach. And they don't necessarily have to have the same kind of fun you do. So if they get an absolute dicing and destroy you, as well as maybe asking how they did it, just also remember they've just had a great thing for them. Try and say well done. Try really hard to mean it. Because they're just having fun the way they want to try and have fun. If you do sit down opposite someone who you want to be super competitive and they just go, yeah, I've just painted these, aren't they great? Have a look at the painting. Appreciate what they're in Blood Bowl for. Because there's all sorts of us playing Blood Bowl for all sorts of reasons. And I promise you they're almost all a unique blend of all the different reasons we're all in Blood Bowl. Try and remember it's for fun. That's something we lose very quickly. We start out thinking it's hilarious and silly. And very quickly, if we're staying in Blood Bowl, we start taking it probably too seriously. So still try and find that fun. And remember the other person on the other side, whether it's a computer or a table, is trying to find it too. I hope you've enjoyed talking to the lovely new coaches. Thank you very much for coming on, guys. Volunteers, except one I press ganged into it. I'm not going to reveal who is who. It's been great to hear some newer voices talking about their experiences in Blood Bowl and what you've learned from it. I hope the people out there in Blood Bowl world appreciate you for it. I certainly do. If I could ask you in that wonderful Teletubbies way I always do, to all wave goodbye at the same time, it gives me something nice and easy to find in the edit. That was One Blood Bowl One World, One Blood Bowl, number 43. 10 things we all wish we knew when we started Blood Bowl. Wasn't number 8 amazing? Thank you, everybody, and good night. Fantastic.